Welcome to Kaiser University Multidisciplinary Center as we present today's webinar, Financial Literacy Part 2, presented by Dr. Rosa.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of our financial literacy series. If you were unable to watch part 1, that is on demand, so you should be able to locate that. But no worries if you didn't do part 1. Today, we're still going to cover some new concepts, as well as do some overview of what we discussed in part 1. I would describe part 2 as a little bit more intense, getting into a little bit more complicated topics. My goal is to provide you with information to increase your confidence level in discussing financial matters. So that will hopefully translate into the classroom as you also being more comfortable. So I'm going to just expose you to different topics and provide you some information on those topics, and then you could do a more deeper dive into whichever topic you're more interested in as well. So today we're going to talk about credit scores and credit reports, some strategies to teach children about investing, and then identify some financial resources for kids and teens. So this workshop in particular is going to cater to our students in our classrooms, students that are transitioning, and also to you. If you have children, some tips that we can help with your own children and with telling parents, and as well as community partners who want to just create or thinking about creating financial literacy programs for their schools. So we're going to cover a wide range of audiences through the presentation and the information that I'm going to share with you today. So if you have any questions, please write them down, hold on to them. And at the end, we should have some time for any questions. And if I don't know the answer, I will take down your information and get it for you. So a little bit about myself first. I'm Dr. Rosa, Kaiser University professor in the education department. I have not formally studied finances. Everything I know and talk about is based on personal experiences and just doing my own research, whether it be through watching Susie Orman every week when she was on TV on CNNBC, learned lots of information from her. I also listen to Dave Ramsey has a podcast and a channel on XM Satellite Radio. So I would say those two are the biggest influence or how I acquire my knowledge to talk about financial literacy. So, and they do have different philosophies, slightly different philosophies. So I do try and take the best of both and then share those with you today, especially as we get into credit scores and credit accounts. That could definitely be a little bit more complicated and trying to explain those to our students in our classrooms. So, but let's just start off with a review of last financial literacy part 1 and just by providing a definition. Financial literacy is defined as the ability to use knowledge and skills to manage financial resources effectively for a lifetime of financial well-being. Possessing the skills and knowledge on financial matters to confidentially take effective action that best fulfills an individual's personal, family, and global community goals. As we are all aware of, the pandemic has exacerbated and put a spotlight on many issues that are happening in our society, and one of them are financial issues. We talk about people being, I also do work for the United Way, and they raise a lot of money and preach about how for those people that are one emergency away from being in poverty or being in serious financial debt. And I think what we've seen over the past year is that people have reached that emergency and may have dipped into their financial emergency funds and then some. So for some people, they will be starting from scratch, even if they had emergency funding and were in good shape, circumstances may have caused them to deplete those funds. So many people are also starting from scratch now. So that's why it's so ever important that we talk about this. So If you come to my webinars, you know that I'm a big fan of statistics, and I like to justify the problem and talk about the problem. So that also if you are starting a program in your school, or you need to convince people your leadership, why is it important, then hopefully you can use these statistics as well. So 50% of teens do not know how to use a credit card effectively. 80% of teachers do not feel competent to teach personal finance topics. And that's what we're doing today, increasing your competency. 42% of parents believe schools do not do enough to educate kids about money. Students receive about 8 credit card offers their first week of college. I can attest to that. Almost half of teens do not know how to create a budget. And we did a lot of the creation of a budget in the previous part 1 workshop. 56% of Americans have no rainy day funds. Rainy day means different things to different people. And there are different strategies out there. You will hear at least have $1,000 in a rainy day fund. So at the bare minimum, that would probably count as your rainy day fund. If you're in a better situation, if you talk to Susie Orman or Dave Ramsey, then Susie Orman would say to have 6 months of emergency fund, and she would even say have 8 months of an emergency fund. So, but at the very least, have $1,000. And half of Americans over 15-year-old do not have a bank account. All right, so why is it important that we teach students, especially students with disabilities, about financial literacy? First, it increases independence in daily situations. It teaches and reinforces skills needed to interact with the world of commerce, which none of us can escape. Gives us a sense of pride, of self-reliance, that students can manage it themselves and understand it themselves and not have to rely on other people. The changing financial environment increases the need to understand the benefit of savings, and we just talked about that. There's an increased risk of fraud and identity theft. That can happen to any one of us, even the most experienced people. So trying to just get more tools and be more mindful of that. And then understanding trusted relationships and the importance of keeping information secure. Here are some statistics about credit card debt, and some of us may be living this, so it'll be no surprise, but I'm going to go over it anyway. A majority of US adults, 62%, have had credit card debt in the past 12 months. And of those, more than 2 in 5, 46%, have attempted to find a lower interest rate. And we want that to be, well, we want people to have no credit card debt, but we want that to be 5 in 5. Everyone should be attempting to find lower interest rate. Adult ages 18 to 44 are more likely to have attempted to reduce their interest rate. Further, younger adults ages 18 to 34 are around twice as likely as their older counterparts to have written a letter or email to a creditor to negotiate a lower rate. And those are all good things. And we want to increase those numbers. 13% ages 18 to 34, 7% 35 to 44, 5% 45 to 54, and 1% 55 to 64. Of the 1/3 of adults who have done anything to attempt to attain a lower interest rate for their credit card debt in the past year, the top reasons for not taking action are they are satisfied with their current rates, 33%. They never thought of it, 26%. Men are more likely than women to be satisfied with their current rates, 39% versus 26%. I would add that none of us should be satisfied with any interest rate. If at all possible, we should try and get through life without paying extra money to have money. So we want to take the money we have and use that money, but not pay extra to borrow money. So while over 2 in 3 US adults, 69%, pay all their bills on time and have no debts in collection, this proportion is significantly lower than it has been over the past 4 years. So that's a trend we do not want to see. We want to see that increasing. Thus, more than 1 in 4 admits they do not pay their bills on time, the highest proportion since 33%. Only 16% of all US adults say they have never had any debt. And when I am reviewing these statistics, think about, where do you and where do your students or your family, the parents of your students, where do you think they lie on these spectrums? Nearly 7 in 10 find it difficult to minimize their debt, primarily due to unexpected financial emergencies or reduction of income. Parents of children under the age of 18 are more likely to find it difficult to minimize their debt. If they were behind on debt, US adults would most commonly prefer to be contacted by the debt via email or phone call, and more than half would prefer this communication to occur in a workday. However, we all need to be very suspicious. Whether getting an email from a creditor or a phone call, you really need to verify that that is the person that is wanting to help you and not some type of person that's collecting your information for fraud. Looking for payment programs or arrangements to settle a debt, around 1/3 say a monthly payment plan they can design themselves or a yearly payment plan would be the most helpful. Further, if they were having financial problems related to debt, most US adults, 81%, would reach out for help, most commonly turning to friends and families first. Only 8% said they would first turn to a professional nonprofit credit counseling agency. So if you have a friend like me, that would be a wise idea to ask. But if you don't have a friend that's confident in financial literacy, then you may want to check out some of those nonprofit credit counseling agencies. When asked why they would not reach out to professional nonprofit credit counseling agencies for help if they were having financial problems related to debt, about 1 in 6 US adults say they can resolve their own problems without outside help. Notably, 25% or over 62 million Americans report they would reach out to a professional nonprofit credit counseling agency for help. So you can do a quick Google on any nonprofit credit counseling agencies that you can in your area. Of course, look at their reviews if they have them to make sure they are credible. And then you could use one of those sources if you feel like you need outside help. All right, these are the different types of credit that are available. And when going over these concepts, you know your students, you know how much information they are able to absorb. So present a plan that is going to be easy for your students to be able to understand. So there are two types of credit: secured credit, unsecured credit. Secured credit have lower interest rates, but that typically means that you're in possession of something that they can take away, and that's why the interest rates are lower. So mortgages, home equity loans, auto loans, they're secured, they're a lower interest rate. However, if you default, then they can take away your home and they can take away your car. So unsecured have higher interest rates. So credit cards, personal loans, student loans, those have higher interest rates because if you don't pay, they can't come at you with anything. Except student loans are more difficult to get rid of. You can go to bankruptcy, you can file bankruptcy, and currently student loans are not eligible in bankruptcy court. So keep that in mind when you're talking to students about college and the choice of college that they're making and how much they're going to pay for college, to have that conversation. All right, so credit card has dual meaning, and it's important for students to understand this. Buy something now and pay later. That's one definition of credit. And you can walk through with your students different scenarios. You can simulate these scenarios in the classroom where you can have them get something now and then do something later for it. So that's a concept that you should be able to explain to your students. Credit refers to a person's record to make timely bill payments on loans they currently have, like a credit card, car loan, or student loan. So when we talk about credit, could be one of those two things. So how to get a credit card? So for your students that are maybe transitioning to college, whether it be a 2-year institution, a 4-year institution, they will show up or they will receive once they get their student emails, they may get information about credit cards. Think about you. and when you first got your credit card, and how well you treated it, or uh, how well you did not treat it, based on how much spending on the money you had. So put yourself in those shoes. So for those who have poor credit or limited credit because of your age, a secured credit card may be a good solution. So if you want students to build credit, you could ask them to have a secure credit card. And that means they place a cash deposit into an account, and then they are able to use that account. So it's more like a debit card, which will never go over the amount of money that they have. That would be the ideal solution. You can also be an authorized user on a family member's card. So for example, my sister-in-law has 2 kids. So my niece and nephew, since I can't remember how old, maybe 14 or 15, she has put them as authorized users on their credit cards. So they've been building credit without them knowing this entire time. So that helps to boost up people's credit scores. So that is something you may want to consider doing. And you can be an authorized user and never hand that person a credit card. So that way they wouldn't be tempted to use it. So something you may want to tell parents is that suggestion. So annual percentage rate. Whenever you're taking any type of credit, you want to look at the annual percentage rate. And that's the yearly interest rate that your credit card is charging you. And that'll give you a good idea of how much you'll pay to take out a loan. So, hypothetically, if you're taking out $1,000 loan, there's 10% interest. That could be about $100, over a year. Then if something is $1,000 loan and you have 20% interest, then that may be upwards of $200 a year. And actually writing that on a classroom board and having students see the difference and what impact the percentage rate that they get on a loan or a credit card could be very eye-opening and helping for students to learn that. All right, so 5 tips to get the most of your credit card. And I am proud to say, after my first year of doing credit cards, I probably didn't do any of this, but then I wised up quickly after the first year. So you want to pay on time. I don't think I've had a balance on a credit card probably in decades. So you want to pay on time. You want to stay below your credit limit. So if you have a credit card that has a $2,000 credit card limit, you want to make sure you don't go over the 2,000 or don't go near the 2,000. You want to avoid any unnecessary fees. So late payments, interest payments. If you have a debit card, we're talking about credit cards, but if you have your ATM card and if you go more than 3 times, they may charge you fees. So generally speaking, avoid unnecessary fees. You want to pay more than the minimum payment. So if you have $1,000 balance and the minimum payment is $20, you're just going to keep accumulating interest. So you want to manage it so you're paying more than the minimum payment. And then you want to watch for any changes in terms of your account. Once a year, you'll probably get an email or a notification to check a credit card, and it'll be about 40 a long email that has lots of information. And those are the terms and conditions of your credit card. So you want to pay attention, particularly to interest rate and late payments when doing that. All right, FICO score. So the world has evolved into a place where we are defined by our FICO score. So this is a score. It's a 3-digit number based on the information in your credit report. It helps lenders determine how likely you are to repay a loan. This in turn affects how much you can borrow, how many months you have to repay, and how much it will cost. That's the interest rate. So rule of thumb, the higher the FICO score, the less interest you'll have to pay on a loan. So not all credit scores are FICO scores, but for over 25 years, FICO scores have been the industry standard for determining a person's credit risk. Today, more than 90% of top lenders use FICO scores to make faster, fairer, and more accurate lending decisions. Other credit scores can be very different from FICO scores, sometimes by as much as 100 points. So again, what is a credit score? So credit scores range anywhere from 300 to 850. The highest I ever, and you'll see, you have different, maybe if you have a Discover card, it'll tell you if you have Credit Karma. So definitely write down Credit Karma. That's an app that'll help you manage your credit score and see what kind of credit you have out there. And that's Karma with a K, Credit Karma. So for like one day, I had a credit score of 849. It was a great day. I was very proud, but then that dipped. So now my credit score is about 830. The median FICO score is 720. So anything above 720 will probably get you better interest rates. So even though I'm in the 800s, just having over 720 is going to get me, any of us, a good, decent rate. Consumers that have 599 or less are considered the riskiest customers. So naturally speaking, if you think someone's going to default on a loan, well, you're going to charge them a higher interest rate because you're thinking chances are the person's not going to pay back that loan. The score matters for many reasons, including the interest rate you receive for taking out loans for a new or used car, personal, or home loan. And even though these conversations are complicated, those students that are in transition that may have to have transportation and may have to borrow money, need to have these types of conversations. A higher credit score usually results in lower interest rates for these same loans. All right, so here are the top 5 credit score factors. Number 1, payment history. Payment history is the most important ingredient in credit scoring, and even one missed payment can have a negative impact on your score. Lenders want to be sure that you will pay back your debt and on time when they are considering you for new credit. So you want to always pay in on time. What I used to do is I used to set up my calendar a couple of days before the payment was due to pay. Also something I would do, and I don't do this with a credit card, I actually do this with my water bill, because one time, a couple of years ago, the credit card, I thought the water bill was coming out of my checking account, and for some reason it didn't. So now I always pay 1 month in advance. So for example, if my water bill is $60, then I pay, I guess 1 month I paid $120. So that way when I get the new bill, it's actually $0 because I paid for a month in advance, but I still pay $60. So that way I'm always 1 month in advance. Little side trick there, but thought something that would be important for you to know and something for you to teach your kids about, using a calendar to mark their payments so that they don't ever miss a payment. So missing a payment is detrimental to your credit score. Credit usage, particularly as represented by your credit utilization ratio, is the next most important factor in your credit scores. Your credit utilization ratio is calculated by dividing the total revolving credit you are currently using by the total of all your revolving credit limits. This ratio looks at how much of your available credit you're utilizing and can give a snapshot of how reliant you are on non-cash funds. Using more than 30% of your available credit is a negative to creditors. So if you take all the credit limits on your credit cards, so I know, for example, I have Credit Karma, as I said previously. So I know, it always tells me, I believe with all my credit cards, I have about $95,000 in credit. So if you use 1,000, so let's just say I have $100,000 worth of credit. So if I use $2,000, that's going to give me a 2%. So 2% of the $2,000 out of $100,000 is going to give you a 2% ratio. If I scale up to, if I have $10,000 in credit card debt of an available $100,000, and that's going to be 10% of my credit card utilization is available. So as you can see, the amount of credit you have, you want to keep the ratio low. Credit history length, how long you've held credit cards, make up 15% of your FICO score. This includes the age of your oldest credit account, the age of your newest credit account, and the average of all your accounts. Generally, the longer your credit history, the higher your credit score. So I believe the threshold is like 12 or 13 years. And that's where you get the maximum points towards your credit score. So you want to be very careful with that. That's why it helps to have authorized users to put kids on there. So that way they have an established history of credit. Also, you want to make sure that sometimes you get department store credit cards and you don't use them and they may close. So the rule of thumb is to keep them open if it's going to help your credit. So if you had a J.C. Penney's card and you've had it for 10 years, you want to try and keep that open, because if you eliminate that, you will have 10 years of history, boom, removed from your calculation. So you want to keep your credit cards in there. And then also think about, if you're opening up a new credit card today, then that's going to impact your score. So let's say I have two credit cards. I have one from 15 years and then one today. If I open it up today, then it'll be 15 divided by 0, let's say. So then my credit score goes from 15 years, my credit history from 15 years to 7.5 years. So you want to be very careful when opening up new credit cards. All right, credit mix. People with top credit scores often carry a diverse portfolio of credit accounts, which may include a car, credit card, student loan, mortgage, or other credits. Credit scoring models consider the type of accounts and how many of each you have as an indication of how well you manage a wide range of credit products. So this hit me negatively. So for example, I told you I had, for one day, I had like a credit score of 849. That's because in that same year, I had paid off my student loan and I had paid off my car payment. So I had no monthly debt. So for 1 month, FICO was like, oh, this is great. But then a month later, they were like, he had that. Since I'm not paying monthly payments, I am not proving that I can pay on time. And I have no credit mix. So that actually lowered my score. But hey, that's a good problem to have. Not having the student loan debt and not having the car debt for a lower credit score is not a bad problem to have. And then new credit, so every time you apply for a credit card or a loan and you get an inquiry on an account, it can damage your credit score. So the number of credit accounts you've recently opened, as well as the number of hard inquiries, apply for 10% of your FICO score. So too many accounts or inquiries can indicate increased risk, and as such can hurt your credit score. I recall 4 years ago, shopping around for I was trying to lower my mortgage rate, and I called Rocket Mortgage because they had all these commercials. And the guy was like, he talked to me for 2 minutes. I was like, oh, give me a social security number. It's going to be a soft inquiry. Don't worry about it. So I gave it to him, and boom, I immediately got an alert. And I got a hard inquiry, which lowered my credit score. When you have a hard inquiry, it stays on your credit report for 2 years. So you don't want any hard inquiries. A year ago, I called Comcast Cable. My cable was Xfinity. My cable was somehow it was canceled. I didn't do it. Someone did it. When I called to get it back up, for some reason, the woman ran a hard inquiry on my account. So yeah, the female associate ran a hard inquiry and ran my credit score, and I got a hard inquiry. So I had to go debate it with the 3 credit unions. I had to go debate it with the Xfinity so that they can call the credit union and get it off my account. All right, so why does even having a good credit score matter? Well, if you want to rent an apartment, so they're going to check credit scores, and that may alter the amount of that they're charged a month. Student loans, the interest on a student loan payment, for most of them are going to be guaranteed for the subsidized loans. When you get an unsubsidized loan, that's going to count. Car payments, so the interest rate on a car, even your car insurance may be impacted. And then, believe it or not, job applications. So this is very important to get this concept to students. More and more employers are looking at your credit scores and making hiring decisions based on that. So this is why it's important to have a good FICO score. So we talked a little bit about this as I was telling you all of my personal stories, but just as a reminder, a single late credit card payment can drop your score by 110 points. Using too much available credit can be a red flag to creditors that you're too dependent on credit. Applying for a lot of credit in a short time. Remember I talked about hard inquiries? Each time a lender requests your credit report, a hard inquiry is recorded and they stay for 2 years. Now I've been told, but I can't verify. Like if you're shopping for a mortgage or you're shopping for a car, if you have like in 3 days, you have like 5 inquiries, they understand that and they make some leniency for that, but I haven't verified that, but I've been told that. Defaulting on accounts, obviously it will hurt your foreclosure, bankruptcy, repossession. Each of these can hurt your credit for years. All right, so what's on a credit report? Your credit report contains your credit history as reported to the credit reporting agency by lenders who have extended credit to you. The information in your credit report is also used to generate credit scores such as your FICO scores. If you're talking to students about a credit report, you can just explain to them that it's a report card, but the report card is focused solely on their credit and their FICO score. So making that comparison may help students to understand that. So on the credit score, you have 4 items: your personal information, your name, addresses, employers, date of birth, trade lines, any credit granted in history, timelines of repayment, revolving installments, open-ended payments for the past 7 years, any public record information, bankruptcies, tax liens, child support, and then inquiries. So this is what we've been talking about, any creditors and agencies who have requested your credit report. So those are the 4 things that are on your credit report, which you want to review at least once a year. And there's a pictorial for the students that are more visual. Here's a chart that talks about FICO score, how it's comprised, and I just talked about it: 10% new credit, 15% length of credit history, 10% new credit, 10% credit mix, 35% payment history, and 30% the amount owed. So that's a pictorial representation of what your FICO score is made up of. All right, so how can you check your credit score? So there are 3 credit reporting agencies. They're Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. So if you can get all 3 of those apps, and you may get a different credit score for each. So a lot of people will take the average of the 3. So you can get 1 free credit report per year from each. So if you want to check it more than once a year, if you get 1 from Experian, 1 from Equifax, and 1 from TransUnion, that gives you the opportunity to do it 3 times a year. When you apply for any new line of credit, for example, a new credit card, the creditor requests a copy of the credit report from 1 or more of the credit bureaus. The creditors will evaluate your credit report, a credit score, or other information you provide, such as income or debt information, to determine your credit worthiness, as well as your interest rate. If you're approved, that new card, called the trade line, will be included in your credit report and updated about every 30 days. So how to improve your credit score? I've been infusing this as we've been talking, but once again, pay your bills on time. And you can ask your students maybe to monitor their own family's bills and see if they're paying on time. That would be a good lesson for them to do that. Low credit utilization. Do not close unused credit card. Establish some new credit. Do not open too much credit at once. Exceptions if you're shopping around for a mortgage rate. And request the removal of all derogatory information from your credit report. So if 7 years ago you had a bankruptcy, you had a foreclosure, you had a short sale, you can ask to have that removed from your report. I actually had a major life event about 10 years ago that dramatically impacted my credit score, and that is now off the report. All right, some money management apps, not apples, apps. So I use mint.com. So that is, but I've been having problems with the app just this past 3 months because they converted. But Mint.com used to have all of my banks, all of my credit cards in one app, and I could see the balances. I can see the charges. They would send me alerts in case something happened. So Mint.com, try that. Good budget, envelopes, and pocket expense um, are good apps you can use. All right, student loan forgiveness. For the teachers out there, these are the ways you can have your student loan forgived. Uh, Personally, I tried it and it didn't work. I don't personally know anyone that's been successful in doing this because there's lots of different criteria. But you have the copy of the PowerPoint. If you want to take a picture of this slide or just just refer to this slide at your convenience. But there are some, I know I was looking into it where if you taught if you taught in an urban area for a certain amount of years, I believe it was like 7 or 10 years, and you were on the income contingency plan for your student loan, then part of it would be forgiven. If you watch the news, you'll see all types of movements to forgive loans. So there may be a more formal way to do it. But for now, these are the different things, especially for the public service loan forgiveness and the teacher loan forgiveness, that I believe is income contingent for 7 to 10 years. So look into that, and I believe they may take away like 10 or 16,000, depending on what subject you teach and where you teach. If your school was closed for some reason, maybe you went into a for-profit school that closed, there's a potential for that as well. So look into this at your leisure. You may be eligible to have some forgiveness on student loans. But don't tell me because I'll be mad because I've already paid my student loans. So I'll be very jealous of you. Just kidding, of course. All right, home ownership. This is another slide that may not be applicable to your students right now, but something for them to think about in the future. Just a couple of statistics I'm going to go over, and in the interest of time, I'm going to go past this slide. But considering the current housing market, over half of U.S. adults feel buying is more affordable, while 1/4 believe renting is more affordable. In my personal opinion, if you know you're going to stay in an area for a certain period of time, at least 10 years maybe, then buying a home is going to be more beneficial for you, especially if you have a high credit score, because the philosophy is if you buy a home and let's say you buy a home today and it's worth $150,000 and you lock in that rate, over time, 10 years from now, that same home may be worth 200. So, but you've locked in the rate of 150 for the rest of your life. So that's when you would buy a home, especially now that interest rates are at an all-time low. However, two things I must caution you, and I learned the hard way. So for example, number one, I bought a home about 10 years ago down south in Homestead, Florida. But then I took a job that was up north in Broward County. So didn't stay there more than 2 years, and it was definitely not the wisest decision I have made. So you want to think about how long you're going to be in that home, or if the resale value is going to be good. So definitely can go much more into this if you want. You have my email, lots of information on the slide. But just telling your students the difference between mortgages and owning their own home, just having that conversation and what that would look like in 10, 15, 20 years could be eye-opening for students who want to start paying now, who want to start saving, because ideally you're going to have 20% down when you're going to buy a home, who want to start thinking about that. Retirement. When it comes to retirement savings, 7 in 10 adults say they save some portion of their household income for retirement, which is higher than previous years. Further, more than 1 in 10 now say they save more than 20% of their household's income every year for retirement. So the pandemic has probably opened up our eyes as to retirement, in a sense that if you've been working from home and you've been lucky enough to do that, if you don't have any money for retirement, basically staying in your house morning, noon, and night is going to be your life because you didn't save enough. So either this pandemic working from home has either reinforced that or hindered that. Like personally, I thought that when I retired, I wasn't going to need much money because I was going to stay home and watch Netflix, Hulu, and that's it. I would be comfortable. But now that I've been doing that for the most part of a year and I've watched everything on Netflix and Hulu, I have nothing left for retirement. So I definitely need to save more money so that I can travel and be able to pay my bills for retirement. So trying to teach students about the longer term about retirement is helpful. And then let me just skip to the last sentence. When asked what areas of personal finance worry people the most, the top response among US adults continue to be retiring without having enough money, followed closely by insufficient rainy day funds, are the most common responses. Quick information about retirement. If your employer has a retirement fund, they're matching, you definitely want to match. So if your employer, and so tell students to ask the question about retirement, and if their employer says they will contribute 3% to the retirement, as long as you contribute 3%, then make sure you are contributing that 3% in retirement. If you don't have an employer-sponsored retirement, then the second option you have is to open up a Roth IRA. So a Roth IRA allows Americans, adults, to have $6,000 a year in retirement, and those give you a higher percentage of return rates for the most part, maybe 8-9% in good cases. So those are the two quick things about retirement. Do your employer match, and for those people that are teachers and have pension plans, and that's something they want to look into, and then always have a Roth IRA and contribute to the max if you can every year. The max is $6,000 per adult. All right, so what are some activities you can do for students to help them understand some of these things? So the first thing is financial service providers. Students are going to be overwhelmed when they get to college, all these people wanting their money. So some things you could do now while they're in school. Look at financial institutions from other businesses, bank versus store, to gain an understanding of where money is kept versus where money is spent. So clearly identifying to students, this is a bank, this is what the bank does, and this is a store. Invite a guest speaker from a bank to talk. Take a trip to a local bank, credit union. Identify financial institutions. I invite a guest speaker from a mortgage company to talk. Once again, knowing what your students will be able to comprehend, and match types of financial institutions to the type of services they provide. So mortgage, company to house, bank to paycheck. Now, as I'm reading you this, there's a good chance that students or today's generation will never, ever walk into a bank. With Cash App, with Zelle, with all these electronic payment forms, they may never walk into a bank. But I still think it is important, especially for students having challenges understanding these concepts, that they see what a bank is and that they see what it entails to get them into the frame of mind of understanding what money is. So they can set up I encourage you to set up a classroom bank. Identify an ATM machine if you're setting up a classroom bank. Identify debit and credit cards. Identify the parts of a debit or credit card. Compare and contrast debit cards to credit cards. And invite a guest speaker again from a bank. All right, so for retirement planning, these are some activities you can do with your students. Discuss why people choose to retire. Participate in creating a timeline of employment to retirement. So get an education, obtain a job, set goals, save money, retire, live off of savings. Putting that on some type of visual or having students walk through it experientially may help them to understand what retirement means. And as I said jokingly, a lot of people have experienced retirement just for the nature of what retirement could look like by staying indoors. Interview a person who is retired, and that would be a good way to also involve maybe family members. Compare and contrast retired people versus working people. If you set up that classroom thing that we talked about, utilize the classroom paycheck stub to identify Social Security and employer retirement deductions. And then, so if you're setting up a system of payments in your classroom, maybe you print out a statement, and the statement, maybe you minus some things for health insurance and Social Security employment, just to give students that understanding, and identify the different retirement deductions. Going back to for those of you listening, going back to the Roth IRA, if you haven't filed your taxes yet and you have the money, you can deposit in an IRA, that $6,000 per year, you can deposit that into a Roth IRA before you file your taxes, and it'll count for the previous year. So as you can see, I highly recommend that. All right, so what are some activities for borrowing money? You can sort pictures representing purchases for which loans are needed versus purchases for which loans are not needed. So that's one way to get that concept across the students. Identify possible reasons people may need to borrow money, having students talk that out. Participate in filling out a loan application. So I would follow that up with also providing them a sample. So giving them like a little toolkit if they're transitioning from high school to the workforce or to a college. You may want to give them like a toolkit, a money toolkit that has all these different samples and all these different things that'll help them be successful outside of your school. Compare initial loan amount to final payoff amount. So sometimes if you tell students, hey, this thing costs $1,000, right now, you can pay $1,000 for it if you have the money. But if you are borrowing money, this $1,000 item in 20 years, if you pay the minimum payment, it's going to cost you $2,000 or $3,000. So sometimes seeing those numbers on a board or on paper can help people. Identify pictures of common rapid access lenders. Participate in researching, participate in researching rapid access lenders, paying special attention to their interest rates on loans. So those lenders where you can go in and get a payment real quick have much higher interest rates, and they actually predatory lending on those that don't have as much money. So utilize pictures to start a standard lender versus rapid access lenders. I said that. Compare a standard bank loan to a rapid access loan to gain a better understanding of the interest charged. Compare and contrast the total amount paid if paying only minimum versus paying over minimum due. All right, also, you want to help students maybe define credit history, discuss the importance of having positive credit. And all these you could do yourself. You could bring in guest speakers, or you may have some of your students that maybe have a better understanding of this, be the ones to also help. Discuss the correlation between positive credit and trust. Connect everyday items that are affected by the credit report: renting apartments, making utility deposits, car insurance rates, buying a car, anything you can do. And as I stated in the first workshop, if you are comfortable, if you build trust with your students, and if you're comfortable, anything that you're experiencing with any of this, just sharing those experiences with the students. Hey, I'm moving apartments and I did this, or I turned on the electricity and had to make a deposit, or my insurance went up. Anything to make it real would help students to understand, or at least start thinking about it. Compare and contrast two credit reports. That could be something useful, and if they're of age, maybe they have one. Identify items included in a credit report. Identify an interest rate. Define an interest rate. Compare and contrast interest rates and payment schedules to the total amount paid. Identify different interest rates. Match equations to converted interest rates applied to principal of loan. So this is more complicated math-wise. So you want to break it down to as simple as possible. Use 10, 20, 30, $100. Use very simple, small amounts of money to get the point across. And as I stated in the first financial literacy, when possible, this was probably more appropriate for parents, but when possible, use real money. Studies show that using fake money or monopoly money doesn't have quite the impact that it does when having real money. So, I know as teachers, you can't be out there giving away all your money and using it for samples. But if possible, if parents maybe can do that, or you give that advice to parents, that may be more beneficial. All right, credit cards and online shopping. If you want to help your students do that, you can discuss the importance of comparison shopping, describe and act out what comparison shopping looks like, participate in researching a variety of stores or websites that sell the same item, participate in the process of making purchases online, identify icons that represent secure websites, sort the benefits versus risks of online shopping. There are some tips for that. Define what the minimum payment is, compare the minimum payment to payment in full, discuss positive and negative effects of using a credit card, utilizing the chart on a credit card bill, identify the most cost-effective payment choice, and compare final cost of purchasing an item when paid by using a credit card when paying minimum payment versus paying in full. So a lot of these overlap because these strategies can be used for multiple topics. Charitable giving. Dave Ramsey says, after you retire and you've paid off all your bills, I believe he has 5 or 6 steps for financial independence. The second one is give like you've never given before. So, having students see them fortunate to have money, if they have money, and then being able to enlighten others. So discuss why people volunteer, identify volunteer opportunities, develop classroom activity to assist maybe in a charitable organization, participate in a school-wide charitable community drive, participate as a volunteer in an activity, discuss how volunteers helped others, compare and contrast paid workers versus volunteers, and identify a common community need and discuss different ways to help. So those are ways that you can talk about charitable giving. Participate in researching nonprofit organizations could be one. Match common local charitable organizations to a given need, compare and contrast businesses versus charitable organizations. And you may have students that need charitable organizations. So this may be a way also for you to expose them to it in case they're in need of the services. We talked about this last time. I'm going to go over it again. These are the 6 steps that the National Disabilities Institute, if you're starting from scratch, a financial literacy program in your school, these are the 6 steps. Step number 1, create an understanding of why it is important for students with disabilities to understand financial literacy. Step 2, determine your budget. Step 3, choose the right curriculum for your classroom. Step 4, identify community partners to assist. Step 5, create peer-to-peer learning opportunities. And step 6, have fun and be creative. And I'll add a step 7, make sure you invite Dr. Rosa to your lessons. All right, I know that was a lot of information in a small amount of time. A lot of this information is also for you to, once again, increase your confidence in financial literacy so that in turn, you are more comfortable trying these new ideas and bringing them up to students. So in the short period of time we have, do we have any questions